All right, we got one more minute. Hello, welcome to the new monthly reNFT community call. Today, I am your host, Jing Kieran, and I'm joined by the CEO. And for some reason, I can hear my own mic, and it's throwing me off a lot. One second.
Trying to see if it's through me.
I'm not sure. It shows up on my end. Where's it coming from?
Through Discord?
Shouldn't be. Let me mute myself. No, not Discord. This is new. We didn't have this problem yesterday. Well, let me try something. Is that it? Oh, can you still hear me, Nick? No. So oh, there it is. Found it. We got it. Sorry, guys. It was our video software, the camera system, but we're good. Anyways, I'm your host, Jim Kieran, and today I'm joined by the CEO and co-founder of reNFT, Nick Vale. How are you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing good. How about you? Now that we got the technical difficulties out of the way, we're smooth.
I know. I had to change my webcam so that way you could see me through the software as well. I did notice yesterday none of the other panelists could see me, so I was like, oh, let's fix that real quick. And that's what was throwing things off. So I'm curious, what actually brought you into Web3 initially?
Yeah, it's a deep question. Most of my background's kind of, I started in traditional indie game development, specifically back when Xbox indie games were kind of the craze, like pre-game engine days.
Real quick. So Juan is saying that they can't hear you, so you may have to join the stage for Discord.
Got it. Hold on. I don't. Here, I requested to speak. I think you have to approve me. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, I just need to mute my own volume. Okay, should be good now. Awesome. So most of my background's like traditionally kind of indie game development. Xbox had a program way back on their indie games marketplace. It's like pre-arcade, even taking off on the console systems, where you could essentially like learn their XNA framework, develop games, be peer reviewed by other game developers. It's actually very reminiscent, and like I draw a lot of parallels to what's happening today with NFTs, Web3, whatever you want to call it. Where it was very like community boots to ground. Of course, there was no Discord or anything, but it was really all happening through online forums and that sort of thing. Nonetheless, built two titles in particular, one of which was the first real port of Minecraft to Xbox called Total Miner. We grew that to be the best selling of all time on Xbox indie games. From there, went on to do another title called Miner of Duty that was like a early shooter voxel builder, like janky Fortnite kind of, but before it was really a thing. And anyway, like why I draw to that is because I learned about Bitcoin and kind of went down the crypto rabbit hole in really full time all in 2014. And when I learned about NFTs in 2017 through CryptoKitties, like I drew all these parallels, because what happened with Xbox indie games is Microsoft actually shut down the marketplace. They shut down the framework, they stopped supporting it, and virtually, we had a game with we sold like well over 4 million copies of Total Miner, for instance, and essentially went to zero overnight, right? Like we had a forum of users that played the game. That was really it. We didn't have like this really active communication platform, because even forums were like for your diehard fans or people who wanted to get feedback on the game, that sort of thing. It wasn't like where people went to game, right? They played on the console, they talked in Xbox parties, that sort of thing. And so it was shocking to me that centralized platform, publisher, whatever, could just end it overnight. And the main reason for doing that is because they wanted to support the arcade marketplace, which was kind of pay to play, right? So you as a publisher, you had to put up anywhere from 250,000 to, multiple millions of dollars based on what we were trying to actually publish. And on top of that, they took a 30% take rate from all your sales, right? Just as a platform. And so they just shut that down overnight, right? So I saw that, and like I drew exactly what happened from past experience, and that this is something that can solve similar issues. So I joined the Sandbox game really full time then, for about I was there about 2.5 years, where ultimately kind of the core reNFT idea spun out of, which I know we'll get into in a bit. But yeah, it was really that passion of gaming and like going through these things firsthand and having communities disappear overnight because someone says so, right? That sparked this curiosity around NFTs for me.
100%. That's actually kind of what, believe it or not, brought me into the Web3 scene as well. I've helped back multiple projects throughout the years. I love buying founders passes for games that I really see potential in. But there's been a recent trend of games shutting down often before they even hit their launch. And I'm like, I bought all these skins, I've got all these weapons, and I got the characters I leveled up, and they're just gone overnight. And I'm like, well, what happened? And you're right, forums don't really keep a community alive anymore. Like Discord is kind of phased out forums when you think about it. So, as much as I love being able to engage with other people, and I used to always be on forums back during my Diablo 2 and StarCraft days, like way back when. These days, I don't think I ever touch a forum. I don't even know what they look like anymore. So,
Totally.
I came over and saw a lot of opportunity with the tech. I'm like, well, now when a game shuts down, those assets and stuff that we've all as players accumulated and farmed, even if the game goes away, we can convince another project, hey, this game shut down, we've got all these assets, can you do something with it? And you might not see like the exact 1-to-1 ratio, like you're not going to get, for example, like a World of Warcraft mount inside of Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft Auto can look at my World of Warcraft data and be like, you own a dragon mount, well, here's a dragon themed car skin, right? And I was like, there's a lot of potential with this tech to solve some of these issues that we're seeing in Web 2, 100%. And you did touch on Sandbox. I kind of want to ask you about your experience over there, because they seem to be one of the big players in the space, and I'm wondering what it was like working with them.
Yeah, for sure. So I joined pretty much at like really the start of excitement, if that makes sense. I think we were like our marketing team was 6 people, and I was doing a little bit of everything, but it was primarily on the marketing team. I was running our creator fund, which was at the time was crazy. It was a $2 million fund for creators to bring in artists to create content, assets through the Vox Edit program. I sort of managed the Vox Edit software as well. Worked really closely with Seb and all those guys. So it's kind of like family over there for me. I recall like our first land sales, I launched Sand there. I did like our first real land sales were $20 or $40, I forget at the time, and like would barely sell out, right? And then they just catapulted to madness that we know today, obviously, and then back down. But I have nothing but great things to say about the team over there. Like they are, in the co-founders there, Seb and Arthur, are 2 of the hardest working people I've ever met in the space. Like it is mayhem over there. I always say a job at the Sandbox is like 2 full-time jobs, because you're in it. You're like the energy is alive and well, and it's madness, and like the vision is very clear, and the people there, believe in true asset ownership. They believe in this like decentralized Roblox vision. There's obviously a long road to get there, but nothing but great things to say about the team over there. I think I lost you.
Is it still echoing for you guys? I'm checking on the Discord real quick. They said that there's a bit of an echo. Yeah, they said it's still echoing.
I think it's for me. So try now. Is it echoing now?
Is it still echoing? I said, yep. Oh, nope. So, okay, I guess it was something on your end.
The problem is I can't talk. And so what I'll do is I'll mute when you talk on Discord.
That is weird. Okay. Anyway, so it sounds like you had a pretty good experience over there overall. But what kind of prompted you, so to speak, to lean more towards building your own platform in the reNFT system?
Yeah, reNFT, like really, like I was seeing the madness happening at the sandbox with people acquiring, primarily there's a lot of investors, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
product. There really wasn't even much you could do at the time. Like it was pre most things. Like you could create assets, you could put them on the marketplace, sort of like that was just coming about.
Yeah.
But it was shocking to me that all these people were acquiring virtual land and at game NFTs were starting to make sense. Like at the time, art was getting popular and people saw it. Like then we saw Nifty Gateway and all these kind of like dedicated art
Mm-hmm.
platforms really pop off. But it was shocking that people didn't understand that they're claiming all these things, right? Like I'm going to lend this, I'm going to rent it, passive income here, I'm going to take a loan against it, like all these financial primitives. And the vision was great, it's clear, but to me it was like, okay, there's no tech for this built. And people didn't really get that the limitations of 721, 1155 standards and
Mm-hmm.
like what these assets actually are. Like you can't do these things without additional trustless infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we began on a pretty simple concept. It was a little different at the time. It had like a DeFi component where I met Naz, the co-founder of reNFT and CTO. We met at a hackathon. It was a Chainlink hackathon actually about I think 2.5, maybe even 3 years ago now. And we just kind of hit it off and like we were concepting ideas. This one came up, made a lot of sense. From there, we won that hackathon. We had some grants. We said, hey, maybe let's take this to another hackathon. The concept's interesting. People are getting it. We ended up winning like 3 or 4 more with slightly different spins on the concept, like kind of adjusting as we went. And then kind of went all in full time. So we had built this MVP. It made sense. Obviously, we knew it was early in a lot of ways. And still reNFT is early in many ways, but it's starting to come to fruition. But our end vision of like, if you believe in digital asset ownership, the extended effects are there, or you don't truly own your assets, are clear. But we built a lot of cool things along that way. Like I think I see Naz. We built like the first subscription NFT at a Superfluid hackathon. Like many different like just proof of concept iterations that spun off of rentals.
I love the fact that you just use the word iterations. I was actually going to ask you about that. Do you think that the iterative building process has been a blessing for you guys? Because it sounds like you kind of started with an idea, and throughout the hackathons, you just kept building and changing and building and changing, and eventually landed on something functional, right?
Right. And not even necessarily that it's functional, right? But more that it's something people actually need or they see value in. It still to this day, like that's the model we operate under. And we'll touch on that in a second because there's more of that happening now, which is like not only the market continues to change and you can't build for the market, right? Like I think a lot of people try to do that. The flavor is going to change every week. You need a long-term vision in mind and an end thesis. But building for like what is actually needed, what users actually want. Like as we saw users come into reNFT as well, we started to see what they don't like, what they do like, and we were continuing to, and like we'll continue iterating based on like actual data, actual feedback, and build things that are actually usable.
So, with that in mind, you guys are constantly building based on feedback and stuff like that. What are you guys kind of working on right now?
Yeah, so a lot. Obviously, for those that aren't familiar, I'm sure most people here already are, but we are plug and play NFT renting and lending tech. So we're sort of a protocol first, platform second. Our end bread and butter vision is really white label, where any game or NFT project, whatever it is, whatever use case they have in mind, they can themselves take the tech, implement it like very simply. They can use our front-facing platform if they want as the actual interface. They can build it directly into their game, into their token gating system, whatever it is. But today we're really focused on gaming. Like that is what gets us to the broader use cases. That's where we see a lot of that use. That's where our users are using it today. And one of our biggest hurdles over the past 6 months, especially maybe even a year, has really been like integrations, right? You need slight adjustments to the development stack, a simple API call in most cases, and some more complex, to these different games. And one of the things we've learned, which is very painful, is that a lot of people don't talk about it either, is that every game we meet with, and again, like we've close to, well over 100 in our pipeline that we've talked to, are integrating with, or have gone deep with, and they all are doing something different to some extent. Like the foundation we're building on in Web3, a lot of people forget, is still very much sand in of itself, right? Like it's not quite concrete yet. It's not quite solid. Things are changing. Every game is doing something different from what's on chain, off chain, what kind of wallet flows they have, if those wallet flows even actually work. Like we've run into that recently as well, where they might have X things, but I'm not quite sure anyone's even testing them because they're not working, right? Which granted, like speaks to the early days of where we are. But to get back to your actual question, one of the things we're working on that we're excited about, we're not going to talk too much about just yet, but is there's been advancements in different protocols where we can now have a way to build integration-free rentals that don't rely on centralization and custodialship, which was one of the big things. Like we could have always built a centralized based way to do it where we're managing private keys, but we don't believe, like at a certain point you're not Web3, right? If you're managing these sorts of things, and there's a place for that, but that's not what we want to push. And so that's a little hint I'll leave it at.
So we got a little bit of alpha here for those that tuned in. More reason to join our reNFT calls. Cough, cough. That did prompt a follow-up, but I'm going to hold that till later. So we'll go ahead and just keep going for now, but I got a good question surrounding that process. With that being said, though, so right now, from an internal standpoint, what are you guys currently, kind of going on? Like, what do you got going on? Are you, still hiring? Are you trying to find more developers? Are you guys growing? Like, what's it look like inside?
Yeah, very much growing. We have always operated, I think in these dark times, you see a lot of companies disappear. We've always operated under the thesis that gaming, NFTs, like digital asset ownership, whatever you want to bucket it as, is a ways out. And when a game says they're going to be out in a year, I come from the game industry. I know that means 2 years, right, at the earliest. And that these things, it's not even like traditional software development. Like it can slide and scale based on how their core loop's working, what kind of feedback they're getting, which is good. Like that's what should be happening. That's the process. So we're very much like in a growth phase right now, for sure. We're still very, like we see users, we see activity, but our pure focus right now is bringing in integrations, bringing in volume, continuing to build for what users actually want, and iterating based on that feedback to provide something that's actually usable and valuable. So we are hiring. We're actually hiring for 2 roles in particular right now, one of which is a content marketing producer, which we've shared a couple of times. So we'll pin it there somewhere, and a lead backend developer as well. But we are very much scaling and in a very healthy position, and continuing to build a real product.
Well, there you go. There you go. Again, more alpha. If you guys are looking for a Web3 position, they've got a couple open. I'm not sure how many of you guys are developers. I know I'm not, but content, on the other hand, I do like content. So, so with you guys expanding and growing, obviously taking feedback and adjusting the project, what would you say right now is kind of like your quote unquote top priority? Like, what's your main focus right now?
Yeah, main focus is still integrations and activity. Like we're seeing volume. So we just, on our Avalanche integration through Castle Crush, we're about to pass 160,000, I think, rentals completed. And we see anywhere from 500 to like up to 2,000 active users on that, which is small in traditional, but in Web3 is like most people, have negative users, if that makes sense, bots or whatever. So it's exciting to see. But yeah, it's very much onboarding new games and also getting our tech ready for games, right? Like there's still a lot of things we need to be doing. So like our front end team's been absolutely crushing it. They're pushing, UX updates, bug fixes like weekly, like multiple weekly. Our backend team, again, like we've shifted focus towards this new initiative I was kind of explaining to you guys for integration free. We're kind of preparing for that as a lot of these games actually launch. I think over the next year and a half, we're going to see a lot of these products finally go to market with something. And so we're kind of just positioning for that scale, so to speak. We've seen a few games, but there's nothing, we haven't seen that game yet, right, in the broader space.
Yeah, 100%. I think it might be some time before we see that game in general. A lot of them obviously still very early in the building process. Most of them either in pre-alpha, alpha, or beta. Um, so I think that's just going to be a matter of time. But with that in mind, how many games does reNFT currently support?
Yeah, so we're currently live on ETH, Polygon, and Avalanche. For chains, right? In terms of Avalanche, we're live with one game, Castle Crush. That's kind of our flagship activity right now. We're starting to launch with quite a few Polygon games. So we went live with Toshimon, Fabwelt's Arsenal, seeing some actually an interesting case there. A lot of there's handfuls of rentals around there. Yield multiplier NFT, just kind of a DeFi case of sorts. We launched, I think I mentioned Toshimon. The most exciting on Polygon, which we just recently launched with, I think a week ago now, is Pixels. So they're obviously top game on Polygon right now. We launched a land rental feature with them. So we're excited to see how that shapes out. We're already getting a lot of feedback around what users are willing to or not willing to do from that. So we're live with a handful and many to come. Like our biggest pain point right now is that a lot of these games aren't live, right? Again, like we have well over 100 in the pipeline and another 40, 50 plus platforms that want to integrate our SDK, which are like launchers, tournament platforms, anywhere that's not a product but has NFTs that can be used. And so we just really need those games to go live. Like that's our biggest pain point, really.
I could definitely see that. Now, you mentioned tournaments, so I'm curious. Um, Obviously, I know, but for the people watching, how do rentals play into like a tournament system?
Yeah, so like our biggest thing is never defining someone's use case, but rather building the tech for them to implement it however they see it. Like, and that's how we work with a lot of these games. With tournaments, like my own thesis that's interesting is like imagine, you're entering a tournament. I think people will run, dedicated token gated tournaments, be it like, hey, you need this rare fur to play in Rumble Kongs, or you need this X boost to play, or you want to fill out, like we saw a lot of rentals in Castle Crush where people were just filling out their deck. So they had like a pretty solid lineup of characters, right, to attack the opponent's castle, but they needed like a higher level archer or whatever it is. So like small cases like that, all the way up to like larger ones. So it kind of just depends on what those NFTs look like, what the tournament looks like. There's going to be obviously variables usually in your standard tournament, like based on skill. Like you're not going to pair a low level with some insane level. Like there is no competition, right? But we view it as a way to gain an edge, a deeper experience, whatever the case is, or even just access to that tournament.
And that's kind of how I was seeing it too in my head. They people want to bring more value to their holders, right? And I think that the token gated tournaments are actually a good way to do that because it gives the holder the option, hey, do I want to participate myself, which there's direct value there, or do I want to rent it out to somebody else who wants to participate? And there's still value there because that means there's an ROI involved. So I think either way you go with it, it actually works.
We saw it, like a great example is what we saw with Dookie Dash. Like what Dookie Dash showed is that most of these holders are not gamers. And if they are gamers, they're not great gamers, right? They're not skilled gamers. They're just casual gamers, right? And so we saw a lot of that, right? We even spun up a fun experiment of our own just to see what would happen. And you saw that, like you saw people renting out, like in a trust manner in most cases, where they're just like, hey, I'll send it to you. I'll send you an ETH to get me a high score. And what that showed is that, as we know, there's a lot of investors in the space. And I think we're going to continue to see, just like you see in traditional gaming, whales hold up, majority of the economy, majority of the sales. We're going to see that. But now, through rentals, there's a way where they can be that investor or they can be that large holder and still allow for users to come in and use those assets how they need to be for the game to actually be usable and survive, right?
And outside of your investors, also guilds, right? If guilds come together, they raise the funds and they buy a big land or something like that. Well, now all of a sudden you can get a return because you're like, hey, there's crafting or whatever tied up with this land, and only landholders can do this. Well, initially, obviously, it might off put other players if they can't afford the lands, but what they can do is be like, hey, we'll let you use our land for $1, right? They come in, they rent the land, they craft whatever, and all of a sudden you build a player economy where these players who otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford the land can still get the utility from it at a much more reasonable price, and the guilds can continue building off of the revenue that they're bringing in using those lands. So it's a form of passive revenue for these guilds to continue supporting their ventures, whether it be within the game that they're renting out on, or even other games where they may go buy other lands and start renting those out too. So it's a good way for guilds to also kind of bring back value to the community and help them out whenever that's not the investment case. Because obviously investors, they're not going to care about the player base. Let's be honest. They're gonna buy and want ROI. That's all they care about. So
Totally, totally. And that's like it's a funny conversation with we get into games often, which is around like obviously what happened with Axie and rentals. And the funniest part is people always say, well, rentals break the game or break the economy. And I always point out that Axie didn't have a rental system. Like when there's value to be extracted and there's a broken economy, broken reward system, it will be. And that's point in case. Like people were sharing account emails and passwords, right? There was no rental system. In fact, the problem was that you had people launching full-time businesses with a ton of capital behind it, and you didn't have your everyday users that could come in there and rent an asset or lend an asset, like myself, who I have some gaming assets, I want to lend it out. So we usually like point that out because it's funny to see, right? Like when there is value to be extracted, there will be it through bots, be it through whatever mechanism, it will happen, right?
100%. And I'm curious, do you guys have any like metric systems or something that game devs can see what sort of impact that reNFT has had with their project? And have you guys like do you have any um, like pedestal stories? Like, do you have any situations where you can already be like, we did this, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Castle Crush is obviously the most interesting, most volume, and what we saw there was pretty unique because um, we saw about 44, it's 44 or 45, I forget off the top of my head, percent of users that interacted with their blockchain layer actually come in through rentals, right? So 45% of them actually were onboarded through rentals. But what's interesting from that is about 37, 38% actually converted to in-app purchases, right? And why I point that case out is because there was no real value to be extracted, right? Like when you have value extraction, it obviously skews your numbers and it's tough to really see what's actually going on. Their ACS token that people actually earned didn't even have a liquidity pool live. Like I think there was a community launched one that had like 800 or $1,000 in it. So there was no real off ramp. It was only used in game to upgrade cards, purchase cards, continue playing, enter tournaments, like that sort of thing. And so you actually saw people enjoying the game, getting involved. They started through renting, then they ended up buying cards of their own through their earnings and staying in the ecosystem, right? Like, sure, you might have seen some exits, some withdrawals, but most of them like offset, your traditional user acquisition costs, right?
Yeah. So definitely. I'm just from the developer standpoint though, is there like a dashboard or something that they can visibly visit and actually like see, hey, this is what's coming from it, reNFT?
Yeah, we haven't. So like we have a kind of detailed data deck, which DMS will send it to you. We use it usually for partners and pitching. But actually, I put out a thread on my own Twitter as well that reNFT has tweeted it somewhere as well, that dives a little deeper into them with visual examples. So we'll post that for everyone too. But we do have some Dune dashboards. Our Avalanche one is the only real one up there. We're still working on like a Polygon one to get more insights of what's happening there. But you can check out the reNFT Avalanche one to see what happened through Castle Crush there and the rentals happening there. Because it's all on
Perfect.
chain, right? So anyone can kind of
Mm-hmm.
take the data and see what they want from it.
Yep, that's the benefit, and that's something I was mentioning in our call yesterday. You know, right now with the way that Web 2 functions, if a company comes in and just deletes, my asset for whatever reason, and whether it be, oh, you gave us a chargeback or something like that, the onus is on me. I have to go through all my emails, find the receipts, and fight with their support to get that back. But when it comes to Web3, all the data we need is on chain. We just need the tools to pull it and kind of compile it in a more readable format. And it sounds like you guys are already working on that. So I think a lot of developers will appreciate that, because that's something that it feels like we're missing in this space is metrics, not just within like the markets, but also from content creators. We don't know what type of impact we really have on the space, because all we have is stream numbers from our platforms. But even those often are not accurate. So I can sit here and claim, oh, I got 20 eyes on your game. Did I really though? You know, you enter blockchain and all of a sudden, boom, everything's public.
It sort of plays, it's a great point. It really plays into this point too around like what metrics to look at. Like this is a very subjective thing in blockchain Web3, right? Which is like you see chains claim, unique active wallets, and then you go look and you're like, okay, 90% of them aren't actually transacting volume, right? So maybe 90% actually don't matter. 10% are transacting $500 million in volume, right? And so you see a lot of people using different metrics all over the place. And I think people need to experiment more so that we can find standards that work and standard metrics that actually make sense, because every metric, depending on how you look at it, has its ups and downs, right? And you kind of need a culmination of all of them to see the full story of what's actually happening.
100%. And you made a good point about like the daily and monthly active wallets. I don't quite follow 100% proper Web3 security. Don't sue me. But even now, with my current setup, I've got at least probably 5 different wallets by myself. So when you start thinking about Web3 as a whole, people practicing proper security, making sure they've got their hot and cold wallet, maybe they got a game dedicated one, maybe they dedicate each wallet for each game. There's so many different ways to try and keep yourself safe in this space that it feels like that wallet metric is highly skewed, and it shouldn't be like even in a debate. I think everybody can recognize that those numbers aren't really worth looking at right now. But I guess I'm curious, and maybe this is something that maybe even reNFT might be able to solve through their platform. What if you were able to have a not necessarily centralized from a Web 2 perspective, but a centralized Web 3 profile, so to speak, that you can connect to all these games that already has your gaming wallet attached, right? Then you have an account metric versus a wallet metric.
Yeah, I'm excited about this area. Like just personally, we're not doing a ton with it as a company yet. I think we will adopt a lot of what's happening. And what I mean by that is like a lot of guilds are going through identity crises of their own, right? And a lot of them are pivoting to esports or like soulbound type of reputation platforms. And we don't necessarily want to be that, but we do want to use it, right? Like one of the things we learned from a lot of our users is that lenders care who is renting their assets, right? Because they're stuck with them for some period of time. It's sort of like doing a background check on somebody to rent your home in real life, right? Are you just going to let anyone in? Maybe not, right? Granted, they can't damage it through reNFT. So it's a little bit of a different scenario, right? Like they can't actually destroy the asset or do anything with it. They just can not advance it or not earn from it, right? So it's kind of like a flipped problem. But regardless, like the end thesis is the same. And so we view our platform evolving over time, like accepting a lot of that data, like being able to, as those platforms evolve, actually take it into our own platform and say, hey, this user's done X, Y, and Z in all these games. They're a high renter or they're a more skilled renter. We actually saw that a lot of the renters versus traditional players in Castle Crush touching their blockchain layer, they were actually competing more and earning more, meaning that they're actually more skilled than just the traditional users, because likely they've toyed around in other games, or that we have guilds using it as well, so they're handpicking these users, they're whitelisting certain assets for them. So I think there's a whole other world to dive into there, but I think over the next few years, the data perspective will become really interesting, on top of like targeting advertising to those specific profiles, right?
Exactly, and that's another thing about the blockchain is I don't think really people have looked at the marketing value behind blockchain. If you can see what wallets are purchasing which assets and which games, what genres they tend to stick to, that's really powerful data for anybody in marketing. It's already utilized pretty heavily in Web 2. That's why so many websites have like ad trackers and stuff like that. But if you can do it without having to track somebody's internet activity, that brings a lot more value, not just to the marketing team, but it also brings more safety and privacy to the users. So I think there's a lot that we could use this tech for, and you just hit the nail on the head. But that's a good segue because we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. So my question is, what does the future of reNFT look like to you?
Yeah, a big focus of ours over the next like really year, but even sooner is obviously making sure we don't need an integration for everything. So having tech that not only anyone can just integrate in a certain way, but they can all like a user can come on and just use it, right? They own these assets as a lender. They should be able to rent it out to someone if they want to. So removing that barrier, that's first and foremost. And the second is really opening up a lot more of what we're doing. Like at the end of the day, we are a quote unquote DAO. Like I think that's overused in a lot of ways, but nonetheless, we want to start to incentivize developers. How do we have people come on and be able to build things on top of the reNFT protocol, like building a true protocol and primitive versus like something that our team is working on that's open, right? You have to have this developer community around it, start to incentivize them to build unique things on top, things we're not even thinking about, right? In the same way that, DeFi primitives have existed and evolved. And so that's a big focus of ours, is just opening up a lot more of what we're doing for people to iterate on top of other products of our own, right? Like, so how can we take these different financial use cases and integrate them together? Like, I think NFTX finance personally, like we're starting to see it get interesting through loans, obviously kind of skyrocketing, and there's plenty of things to dive into there. Perps, options, all these kind of things are coming about, and they're very disconnected right now, but we'll start to see that loop get connected in the same way we did through DeFi, just slightly different. And rentals are a huge piece of that. Like one of the biggest problems with valuing an NFT, given how difficult it is because there's no actual income there, right? And so if there is a potential use of that NFT and there can be income coming in, it also gives like a lender a better way to value the loan, right? Just like traditional finance. So I think we'll see a lot of those pieces come together, but our future is very much on becoming the go-to and continuing to be the go-to protocol and platform for anything NFT rentals.
And obviously, with you guys wanting to be the top dog, there's going to be challenges and hurdles involved with that. You as the CEO, what's been kind of the hardest thing that you've encountered so far with getting this off the ground?
Yeah, I think it's just the nature of like I was mentioning, building on sand, right? Uh, I can't tell you how many times you need certain infrastructure to be solid to do different things, and a lot of people don't realize that in Web3. Like they don't see what's centralized behind closed doors of these different platforms or protocols, whatever. Um, so like as an example, like when we first started, like data indexing sucked. There was no real, like there was few actually even attempting it. Started to get better. Even at one point, like our dev team built our own data indexer because when that goes down, our platform suddenly isn't usable, right? Because we're not indexing all this data. And then like we saw people like they couldn't return a rental when we had a collateralized based solution. So all these problems start to domino. So I think that's been one of our biggest things is just building. You're sort of building for. Initially, it was use cases that aren't quite here yet. So you're kind of navigating completely uncharted territories and where to turn. And Web3 is a very difficult space. I think a lot of teams don't talk about staying focused on their end mission, right? And you see a lot of like companies that have skyrocketed in these current times or previous times, and a lot of those were built 3 years ago that were
Yeah.
navigating what the hell do we even make, right? So I think that's what I put it at, is building on really rocky foundations is never easy.
So you guys definitely seem very forward thinking. You're kind of pioneering, so to speak. You're walking through uncharted territory, trying to figure things out. Um, how has that kind of been in terms of like like advertising to projects when you're going and telling them, hey, we have this new thing, nobody's done it, nobody's heard of it, we're trying to make solutions for problems that we haven't quite encountered yet, but we see it in the future. Are they looking forward as well, or have you noticed most of them are kind of set in their ways still?
Yeah, we end up doing an immense amount of education is the honest truth, right? Uh, One thing we've realized is great game developers don't understand blockchain yet, and great blockchain developers don't understand traditional gaming, right? Like they're two different worlds, and there's a middle there somewhere. We've seen some teams in that middle and tout the line, but we talked to so many, and like some are gung ho. We send them things to integrate, and like suddenly they don't know how to integrate a single API call. And we're like, if you can't do this, I don't know how your NFTs are going to be even usable in your ecosystem, right? So we do a lot of education. And we saw initially, like we saw Guild Hype start to take us up as well, and suddenly everyone wanted rentals because they saw this glory. And then of course the crash of Axie Infinity was like, wait, that was Rental's fault, and it really wasn't. It was many things, and they played into it. Sure. So we saw people take a step back, and then we've done a lot of groundwork on opening people's eyes to not just like ownership and effects from that, but also like we're not here to develop their reward system or their economy. That's on them. We're here to enable a primitive that they need because they have scarce assets, right? The only way around their problem, if they have an asset that's usable for some unique feature outside of rentals to get people to use them, is to print more of them, right? And so we've seen that be a huge opener. We saw our Castle Crush data really open a lot of people's minds where they're like, hey, our community is asking for it now, because suddenly the value extractors are, I never say they're gone, but they're on pause, right? They're on standby as value flows back into the space. And so the real people who are building a lot of things and see the value, like seem to get it now. It's just a matter of, they're in early alphas at the best, right? For a lot of these games.
Yep. So it sounds like you guys are like, here's the tool, go build.
I wish it was that easy. Like very much so, we want to be that, but it winds up being, hey, we need X, Y, Z. Oh, how do you do X, Y, Z? Which we're happy to do. Like that's one of our strong suits as well, is we get really ingrained with each partner and like understand their needs. We've even advised some of them over like, why are you doing that when you could be doing this? And then when they take a look at it, they're like, hey, that actually makes sense. We just hadn't thought about it yet, right? So it's that chicken and egg for sure.
Well, as somebody who obviously is very forward thinking, how do you see Web3 evolving over the next few years?
Um, yeah, that's a wild question. I think we're in some of the most unique times that, at least myself, I've ever lived through, but a lot of the generations in Web3 will ever live through, in my opinion, just globally in the world speaking. Um, and there's a lot of ways that blockchain can impact it, solve specific problems, or at least attempt to solve specific problems. I think within gaming, we're going to see more and more of kind of like the CSGO playbook, where things are like maybe like it's obviously fully centralized, but we're going to see these markets emerge. We're going to see people don't care at the end of the day, right? Like what's happening, at least gamers under the hood. They want to know how it values, like what does it do for them? How is it valuable to them? What does it change from their day to day that improves it, right? They don't need more hassles. They're there to have fun and be entertained. They're not there to trade. Our space right now is obviously very much traders, and I think we'll always have that segment. Like when you have open economies, you're going to have degens, you're going to have bad actors. Like that's the downside, quote unquote, of Web3, and to some it's a positive, right? But I view Web3 starting to become like a true open financial system for everything, be it gaming, be it traditional finance, whatever the case is. Like legacy systems are such a joke. If you just look at even finance, it's very laughable, right? What's actually happening beneath the covers.
I kind of tell people, so like let's look at music for example, right? If I go spend $3 for a song on Apple Music, I don't own that song. I own a license to be able to use that song, which Apple can revoke at any moment, right? But if I go buy a music NFT, because I've got friends that are actually creating music NFTs, I own the rights to that. I can use it on my streams, I can use it on my YouTube videos. I basically can use it for any commercial purpose that I want because I own it. that is something that Web3 is empowering, because they're still getting their money from the sale. They get money on royalties, which if you look at like Spotify's royalties, for example, you need millions of plays to really get anything worthwhile. Meanwhile, they can sell an NFT and probably compensate for like 500,000 plays on Spotify. So I think that there is a really powerful use case with Web3 moving forward, even outside of gaming, 100%. So I'm right there with you on that. Um,
Absolutely. It's like a lot of people also like they look at the now, right? If you talk to anyone from a younger generation that grew up fully digitally, right? It's very eye opening of like what they think. I had a conversation with a little cousin of mine who's 7, maybe 8 years old, and she was playing a app on her phone, right? Because it's like most little kids, like they're glued to an iPad, right? And I was looking at it, and it was like a makeup universe game of sorts. And she was showing me how she's like a famous fashion icon in the game. And I was I was kind of probing her on like asset ownership, like in a normal way. And it was funny. I was just saying like, hey, if you could, like, she buys many things in them. Like, if you could sell them or trade them, would you be interested? And she's like, yeah. Like, to her, it was just like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Like, I trade things with friends. Um, right. And like, just, it's funny when you talk to somebody younger like that, who is fully digital. Your eyes will be opened in a very different way than like what things you won't see, in current day.
I actually agree with that 100%. I'm not necessarily what I would call the older generation. I'm 32, so I have grown up with technology. I started playing games with the Super Nintendo probably around like 93, 94, and I've definitely been in the era that has grown up with technology. Now, the technology that the kids nowadays are growing up with is drastically different than what I had. Don't get me wrong. So I think that's kind of why people within my generation have definitely been open to the tech, but like skeptical at the same time, because unfortunately we have seen a lot of the headlines, bad news press, so there's a stigma that's kind of stuck with it. So I think my generation's 50-50, but if you're forward thinking and you're looking at the next generation, I haven't seen anybody from a younger crowd that's been anti NFT unless they've been fed enough media to believe NFTs are bad. So I think 10 years from now, people are going to start catching on a lot easier.
Yeah, and it goes to show like I like to think that people always knew to some degree that like big tech companies were extracting their data, selling it, like that there was a lot of shady things going on, and they kind of ignored it because it was ease of use. Like, yeah, maybe my phone's listening to me, but my Amazon feed is great. It tells me exactly what I need, right? Whatever the case is. And finally, it feels like finally we've had proof, and that suddenly changed things mentally, where people are like, oh, well, I knew that, but I didn't know it was that bad, and I didn't know it was that real, right? And there hasn't been a solution. Like, there hasn't been another way of, they're like, great, that's happening, but what do you want me to do, right? And so we're starting to see at least alternatives to that, where people can actually own their own things, own their own data, and control their own destiny to some degree, right? It's a ways off, but nonetheless, like, it's the foundations are getting there.
It's 100% going to be a matter of time. So I did want to circle back to my follow-up question before we jump into the community questions, and that is, what does the process look like? If I'm a game developer right now and I come to you guys, what does it look like to kind of go from I'm a Web 2 game to I'm now a Web 3 game?
Definitely. So we work with everything from, we've worked with large studios like Wildlife, Castle Crush, and others that we haven't announced, all the way down to like an indie game who's a developer creating like a game with NFTs, right? So we don't necessarily define like their NFT integration or how it might look. A lot of them we recommend like best companies we know or have worked with, based on like the goals they're trying to accomplish, right? Be it, hey, we need a custodial based wallet. It's like, great, here's some connects over here that we've heard great things from other game clients. Go your route over here. We integrate with them. But in terms of like actually integrating the rental tech, so our documentation is pretty solid. Like, it's not great, it's getting better, it'll continue to get better, but you can go right on docs.renft.io. We have, our subgraph API that you can utilize to integrate directly with a rental contract. As soon as you put something up for rent on our collateral-free solution, our platform's usable. Like, you can use it right out of the box. We have an SDK as well if you're looking to white label things directly into your own interfaces. So if you have like very basic technical knowledge, you basically just need to integrate wherever you're currently loading in assets now, right? From your own contracts, you just need to support reNFT's contract, which is our kind of use right model, and it will work out of the box. So that's the simplest way, and it can get complex from there. But we're here, we're happy to help. Again, we get very deeply ingrained, so just reach out if you have extended questions. Is what we always say.
So there you go. If you're a Web3 game and you're looking to get into the rental market, you should hit this guy up. Just saying. So we'll go ahead and jump into the community questions now. I'm gonna touch one that is probably, I would say right now it's a hot question. Is it possible to get into ordinals? Which I'm assuming they're asking if reNFT will be able to support ordinals.
Um, the the quick answer is no. Not anytime soon, at least. I mean, I haven't been as in tune from a technical standpoint, nor has our dev team, just because we have so much going on 10 other blockchains over here, with studios or games or projects we're working with. Um, I don't even think it's possible to how people are thinking about it. Like, there's only so much you can do on Bitcoin, and what's happening there, and like there's a lot of hacky approaches people are utilizing. So right now, no, but who knows how things can change in the future, and if there's worthwhile time to even focus on something, if it is possible over there.
Awesome. So unfortunately, the answer on that one is no. Then we're going to. So keep in mind, I'm reading these. I'm reading them verbatim. So whatever happens happens. When will reNFT create a token, and why is it taking forever to launch the rent token?
Are you sure you didn't write that one?
I did not.
Um, yeah, so we've continued, like, we have the same mentality on token as we always have. There will be a token. We will have a token. That has always been the thesis. Like, there's many different ways it plays into reNFT's ecosystem, but we will never launch a token before real use. So we want those really active integrations, real users, real use cases for the token, to where it makes sense. So I always say, like, as we get multiple other integrations with real volume, right? So we're continuing to release integrations, and we watch them, see how they evolve. We have a few that are active, some that are not, and that's really how we play things. Even aside from market conditions and market sentiment, is really just about who's using the protocol, how it's being used, and what kind of volume is flowing through it. And then it makes sense to start to, look at things like user incentivization. How do we kickstart some of these integrations as their products are actually there? But there's no sense in launching a token to have a token that does nothing but distract the team, as well as not really benefit the community, because there's nothing but down only that can really happen to it, right?
True, and I'm glad that you mentioned you want to make sure that there's value, use case, all that, because quite honestly, if I see a project launch a token and I don't know why there's a token, I'm not gonna buy it. It's simple as that. Like, so you guys are definitely wanting to make sure that there's a purpose and it's not just a token to be a token.
I'll quickly add that we've released reNFT Genesis card tokens that are NFTs quite some time ago, and those are a great way to get involved in reNFT's future, is what we always say. And they're a loyal supporter badge. Like, we have people who've held them for years, and that is just a great way to we've teased things along the way about what they actually do and discounted fees and things like that on the platform. And but we'll build that, continue to build around them as it makes sense.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the show. I need to go to MoonPay real quick. Just kidding, just kidding. So if there's no token, are you guys doing any airdrops? Do we have anything coming up to maybe support those holders that you were just mentioning?
I think this plays into the first question still. We look at user incentivization in a lot of ways. And what I like is that, there's so many examples to point to nowadays of what works and what doesn't work. And so we don't continue to put brain energy on it just because it doesn't make sense for quite some time. And as we continue to look at the market, we see more and more examples of ways that do and don't work, right? So that will get interesting when the token makes sense. And there's plenty of pros within there, obviously.
Okay. I mean, just the fact that you guys are considering all this, it seems very well thought out. I'm loving all the answers so far. Um, and this kind of was a little answered earlier, but I want to ask it anyway, just to make sure maybe we can pull a little alpha out of you. Any big caliber games currently in the pipeline?
Many,
Ooh.
many. Like I said, like our pipeline's well over 100. I think many will be interesting. Some will die. Probably a good chunk will die. Who knows, right? Like we're not here to pick the winners. We're here to integrate everywhere, and the winners will show themselves. Um, and so we're talking to game teams daily, right? Like we're
Mm-hmm.
constantly getting new introductions through our investors, through our existing partners. Um, One thing is clear that if you want a plug and play NFT renting and lending solution, or you want this tech for you, we're like one of pretty much none out there that actually works with the most amount of volume and real data to be shown. Um, and so just reach out. But yeah, there's many to come. But again, the timelines range from an early alpha could have it in a month to we're years out from anything, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the painful part. But
Well, with all these games in the pipeline, obviously you guys are constantly involved in the service and taking feedback. Are there any current updates about new integrations that we may be able to share?
like I said, Pixels has been the most exciting as of recent because they have well over 100,000 um, active wallets, however you want to classify that. But they are the top game on Polygon. People were kind of asking for it because they had a lot of land holders with either multiple lands that can't play on them all. And even myself, like I wanted to try the game out. I didn't want to spend $600 on a land necessarily till I knew I actually liked it. So even as a try before you buy, I think we'll see interesting rentals there. Um, and then I won't leak anything else, but there's other games just taking our tech and integrating it that we'll probably hear about in the near future. There's actually a really exciting one that's integrating right now that doesn't have anything to do with gaming, but around token-based access to different drops, things like that. So that will be an interesting one that's a little separate as well. That I'm excited to see go live, and we'll do some marketing initiatives around that as well.
So, right now, if I'm a game project and I wanted to provide limited access that is token gated, is it possible for me to just set up on reNFT and list however many spots I want to give people access to for free, so people could just come in, test the game, return the NFT if they don't like it, and somebody else can follow up and rent it and rinse and repeat.
Yeah, so you as like if you owned the NFTs, you as the game developer, you can put them up for rent, right? And you can have people come in to try your experience. So as simple as integrating that subgraph query wherever you're loading in assets, be it it might not even be in a game. Like maybe it's just on your whatever. Like maybe it's just on your interface to claim something or whatever it is. You can do it, and like the documentation's out there for you to run wild with, and we're happy to help however you need. So yeah, it's absolutely possible.
All right. I just know some platforms kind of have like you have to set a minimum, right? Like it might be $1 or something. But I think that that's actually a great way for games to provide access without necessarily being like, "Hey guys, airdrop, if you hold this, everybody gets an NFT." You could actually gate it and have a limited access available that people can just come and go as they please. So, just some food for thought for anybody watching. If you're running a game project, give me the elbow. Um, So obviously, with everything changing, we've seen the market conditions. I mean, this week alone, a little bit of news and things change so fast. Have you guys seen that the rental system as a whole is still relevant, and do you still see a demand for this system?
We definitely do. Again, like I think the demand isn't there on the user side necessarily yet. Like we are seeing it with some games, but that's mainly because the products aren't live. Like there has to be a reason to actually rent an asset, right? People are always willing to lend. Like that's one thing that's very clear. We've learned a long time ago. Like if you can trustlessly, with no downside, and you're holding an asset anyway, generate income, you're going to do it, right? Even if it's just to give somebody else access to the experience and you're not earning anything, but you're showing someone else the experience to potentially onboard them. But like the products aren't there. Like as we know, the crypto space right now is very low quantity, high volume traders and speculators and degens. And we're not really geared for that in current state, right? Maybe something down the line we'll have that's more geared towards that, but we do see a lot of demand from the game side. We're seeing probably the most demand ever from the game side because these times, like in bull market times when studios are well funded, they have too much money, they have too many employees, they look at something like a rental system and they think, we can figure it out and build it ourselves, right? Until they get in there and figure there's maintenance, there's upkeep. In these times, we've even had some games who in those markets, wanted to build it themselves, come to us and say, hey, we want to stop upkeeping it. We want to just pass it off to you guys. We're happy to give you guys the fee for doing it, right? And so we're seeing a lot of that where people are like, we do want a rental system. We don't have bandwidth to build it, or we can't scale our team to build it, or we need to just focus on our product. Like people have learned focus in the bear market, and that's what's good.
100%. With reNFT, have you guys tried any other sectors aside from gaming, like maybe a tokenized or a solution for tokenized real estate?
We have explored other ones. They're just very niche and there's not a lot of demand for them yet. I think real world assets will get interesting when regulation becomes anything than it is now. We have done some, like we saw in our collateral based solution early on, we did see quite a few people renting stoner cats. If you remember those Ashton Kutcher NFTs way back that gave access to animated shorts, we saw people actually rent them, view them, return them. Again, we're experimenting, as I mentioned, with some like access based rentals, be it drops, real life events, those kind of things. So I'm curious to see how that will evolve. But again, like we don't have to define the use cases. That's just where we focus as a core team. But the tech is there for anyone to do how they want. So if you have an interesting concept you're trying to do, you can just use it, or you can reach out, talk to us in the Discord. Our developers are around too to help you through things if you need it. But we have examples there. You can take it and integrate however you're thinking about it.
That is actually fantastic. I mean, especially when, like you said, we're not going to talk regulations and stuff. We had a plenty of discussion about that yesterday, but I think you're right. Once it's quote unquote safe to start expanding into these other markets, and we don't we have a clear cut guidance on how we can go about doing so. I could definitely see some real powerful use cases for I could say rentals in general, but reNFT is obviously forward thinking. They're ahead of the game, and they're trying to solve the solutions for tomorrow, not today. So I think that's a really powerful thing to consider. But that brings the next question: how are you promoting reNFT next to the developers? And I'm going to alter the question a little bit because, like you just said, it's not necessarily gaming specific. So how are you promoting reNFT next to realistically anybody?
Yeah. So I guess first we're sort of B2B to C, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is we have to integrate, at least in current state. Again, like our future we're working towards is not even having that, but we have to integrate with the existing project, whatever that is, game, whatever. So we do have to target them. We have to target game developers. We have to target developers, the people actually using and integrating the tech, right? And make sure that it's seamless, it's headache free for them. So we have been putting out we put out a lot of blog posts just about the space, but also relative to, technical content. Like Naz, our CTO, puts out threads all over the place of just things that my brain can't understand, but hopefully developers out there brain can understand, that are like technical deep dives all the way to just gaming recaps, what's happening in Web3, what's going on. A lot of the big studios that are coming in and building things, they don't necessarily, they're not on crypto Twitter keeping a pulse all over the place, right? Like we are. And so we like to send some of that content their way. We have our newsletter that summarizes it as well. So we're kind of this turning more we have kind of a media brand that its end goal is to onboard people to the protocol, primarily developers. And we'll see how that evolves as well with an integration-free product where we can actually just target users over the actual integrations themselves.
It'll definitely be
like we're doing it right now, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I'm definitely familiar with the whole B to B to C situation. And I work for an MSP. We provide a lot of services from other businesses that come through us, and then we provide them to the client. So it can definitely get muddied, and if there's a way to streamline it, like 100%, like we take every chance we get, we definitely find those options to where we can just try to go from B to B to C to B to C. So I think that that's really good mentality to hold for sure. Now, the next one, this one I'm not 100% sure on. It may mean something to you. Did you explore on how kitty holders will get ROI based on users paying for platform via fees? So I'm not sure what they mean by kitty holders. I'm not sure if
I
that's like
think
kitty
if you're
cart.
talking the Genesis cards. Um, yes, so we released some information about them a while ago. I love the term kitty holders. I haven't heard that one before. I think of crypto kitties is where my mind goes. But yes, like the perks are still there. We haven't extrapolated like how they look in production because again, like the protocol fees set to 0 for initial adoption, and we're transparent with partners as well on how that evolves. Like we don't truly know. Like we have what we think will happen when we enable protocol fee because we also rev share back with the game. reNFT protocol takes a cut. And that's how the DAO starts to evolve as well. And kitty holders are going to be involved in that process, but it's just too early to say at this moment.
Now, just for clarification, are they're talking about kitty cart holders?
No, so they're talking about our reNFT Genesis cards. We've released 2. One is an Astro Cat, our OG. Actually, funny enough, I thought about it, and I think it's one of the first ever cases of a free NFT. We did it like 2.5 years ago where you just had to retweet a tweet to get it. And at the time that was like unheard of. And it went crazy. And there's quite a bit of volume traded on them for a free NFT. And so that was the first NFT. And then the second one is our cat pleaser, which is like a slightly smaller version. But you can check them out on OpenSea as reNFT Genesis card.
Which Juan just linked in the Discord, or yeah, Juan linked in the Discord, so I'm gonna have to check that out later. Um, Now, this one, they mentioned one specific, but I'm going to ask this as a more broad. How do other renting services, how are they different from reNFT? Like, what do you guys do different? They mentioned Chainlink specifically, but I know of a few, so.
Yeah, so I saw somebody mention that Chainlink doesn't actually have a NFT rentals protocol. It was a blog post just exploring the concept. And again, like we actually have done some things with them, and we're big fans of Chainlink. At least I am personally. But there's not that many competitors out there, right? There's a few. Some of them have taken approaches that we've done. Like again, we've probably built every type of way to do an existing asset rental over the past years, from wrapper solutions to exploring new standards. We've been in EIP working groups. It tends to be that meme of, hey, this doesn't work for me, I need a new standard. And then you build a new standard and there's just 3 standards now, right? Like that's kind of how it evolves. I think at some point we'll have dedicated asset standards, but it's very far out, and users don't want to fragment their volume. Games don't want to have like their own marketplaces, right, for just that type of standard. They're not compatible everywhere. Like you run into many different things. So we applaud like all competitors or people out there. Like I think we need more of synergies and working together, and we even have a lot of them in our spaces and stuff, just talking about the industry. But we are very focused on gaming specifically, and like we've seen based off of real users we have on the platform what they actually want, what they are actually willing to do or not. And so that's kind of how we continue to lead, is just by doing rather than like talking about potentials.
And, the whole doing thing leads into the next segment. Again, remember, these are community questions. I'm not asking, I didn't write this. Why are you going so slow?
Yeah, I think honestly we just haven't communicated a lot. I think to the community outside, I can see how things can feel slow. But if you were to jump in our development team chat or internal chats, you would see that there's many things happening all over the place, and often we don't share enough. And that's something like with this community call system we're going to start changing, is sharing a lot more of the inner happenings. We've realized the community wants to be more involved. They want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. They don't want to just see results that are down the line and future out. Like when you look at an integration like Pixels, I think we've talked to Pixels for 7 months, 8 months. We met them in person even. at different events, and we kind of like showed them why it makes sense, and it just wasn't on their timeline yet, right? We see that with a lot of games. We've talked to some games for a year and a half, and suddenly it starts to be time. So yeah, we're starting to do a lot more content as well. Like our lead front end engineer, Romer, shout out to him. He does our developer blog posts that are pretty in depth, and you can see a lot of what's happening there too. We're obviously continuing to scale the team as well to keep up with things. I just think people might say that because we haven't released a token, but it's probably because we just think about things logically rather than putting something to put something out.
And honestly, that's a great way to approach it, in my opinion. I'm in a couple of chats with developers, and I see all the investors, hurry up, do this, go now, blah, blah, blah. The problem with this is development takes time. Like, I know that there's all these new AI tools, and people are finding new ways to streamline it, but nothing is flawless. Even ChatGPT's code typically requires tweaking, bug fixes, and stuff like that. I write scripts for my job, and whenever I use ChatGPT, it'll put something out. I'll test it. It fails. I have to go back to ChatGPT and be like, "Hey, that didn't work. Here's the error." And it's like, "Oh, we'll try this." And it's iterative. Like even using AI tools, it is an iterative and slow process to make sure everything goes flawlessly. And like you guys working with games, if you just rush out and support every game that came to you right off the bat, well, there's gonna be some rugs involved. I don't think anybody can argue that. So taking your time getting to know the projects, taking your time working on building out a good product versus a rushed product, I think that's honestly the perfect way to go. But that's obviously just my opinion. So
yeah, and it's like we're finally to a really exciting part with our team as well, and like I'm very proud of the team we've put together because it's taken a long time, and that's one of the hardest things I think that people don't talk about is building like not only a global team that's remote and all over the world, but that's like dedicated, passionate about the space. It's very difficult to gather a bunch that's in it for the long haul, as well as like top tier talent. And we have spent more time than you can imagine on hiring, and continue to, because like that's the only way to build something actually meaningful and valuable versus just having people who turn out don't really care what's happening. Like there's plenty of those teams in crypto. We aim to not be that ever.
all right. So obviously you guys definitely looking out for yourself, trying to make sure everything's done the right way. I love it. So the next question is, how much do you bench?
That's from Kong Shlong. I know it.
No, it's from Fud Zero.
Is it?
Kong's is next though.
Okay, I can only imagine what that one is then. Um, I'd rather take guesses. I set my high school bench press record though for my weight and squat record. These days, I'm not that crazy, but that was way back.
More than me, because at this day and age, I'm a little lazy. As you can tell, I'm kind of a twig. I might be able to do the bar.
It's a good thing. These days, your knees start hurting, your back starts hurting. It's like, screws everything up.
If you're below the age of 30, enjoy it while it lasts, because once you're over 30, you live off of aspirin and caffeine. I'm just saying. So Kong's is actually, are you living in an industrial loft, and can we get a room tour in the future?
It is. Actually, a lot of people think it's a background because it kind of looks like a stock loft background. But yeah, it's just an open space. But no room tour.
Sorry, Kong. You have to wait.
Mysterious for Kong Shlong.
So the last question that we have from the community is, what's next for reNFT?
I think you can continue to see more of what we've already been doing, and hopefully at even faster speed. At least, even if we're not fully speeding up, it'll seem like it is to you because we're sharing a lot more. So again, like this community calls the start of a lot of that. Starting to share a lot more, put a lot more out. We're continuing to up the content, up the bar, our production quality. Jen Kieran's been crushing it, obviously, with a lot of the things we've been putting out too. So just starting to involve you more, and I'm excited to see games go live. Like I assure you that nobody wants real protocol activity volume and eventually a token more than the reNFT team. Like these are things that not only are incentives aligned for all of us, but it's what we work for every single day and night. And so you can just continue to see more and more execution and speed increase from all of us.
You mentioned content, and I'm sitting here thinking, as a content creator, what can I do to bring more eyes to reNFT? And I thought about it, and when I go to the Steam's game page, right, the developers can give me access to stream to their page. Would it be possible for you guys to integrate like some sort of stream system so that like partnered creators could stream for a game that you guys offer, and that like so you got the stream up top, right? And then you have like the rentals below the streamers. So we have a reason to drive engagement to the rentals.
That's interesting. I think once products start to come out, we can explore a lot of these things where like not only can we incentivize creators, but we could even do things around like referral based where like maybe a game wants to come in and give Jin Kieran 10 pixel lands to lend out to his audience, right? To onboard them, to show them a deep level of the experience. So I kind of view that as how that will evolve. I think we're just a bit early. Like we start to see some of them. But on that note, like I'll throw out there, if you're a content creator, you are promoting a game actively already that's out there, which there's not many, but nonetheless, if you're playing it, promoting it, they have some sort of usable NFT, reach out to us. We're happy to come up with some interesting piece we can do together where we give some NFTs that they can rent out to your audience. We'll even eat the cost of them, right? And just see how we can engage with you to put out meaningful content around the game.
Awesome. I'd love to hear it. So before we wrap up, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to put out and kind of give the community a heads up alpha something?
No, I think we dropped plenty along the way.
I'm trying here.
Right? You're digging. As always, we appreciate all the support and patience. What we're doing is obviously not easy. It's a very deep vision, and we're thrilled to have everyone along for the ride. And I always throw out, like, if there's a way you want to get deeper involved, to anyone out there listening, join the community, jump in, get involved, join the Discord, reach out. Like we have people on the team that came from the community. There's always a way to get involved, and we'd love to see it. So yeah, follow us, stay tuned, all the announcements to come, and keep supporting is all we can ask for, really.
Perfect. And we will be doing this every month, from my understanding. So make sure that you guys are following on Twitter, LinkedIn, get in the Discord. Any other socials you want to plug right now? Those are the big three that I can think of.
Those are the main. Yeah. Our newsletter, it's on the website. It's really good. A lot of people sleep on it, but the open rates are very high. So check it out if you want some tailored news to your inbox. It's a great one.
Do you guys link alpha through that?
Maybe we'll start. There's always a little bit peppered in, I'm sure.
I mean, you let's be honest. With the Web3, what's the word I'm looking for? With the way that we behave within Web3, if you throw the word alpha out there, people eat it up. And when it comes to newsletters, most people are like, I don't want to sign up for that. But you tell them there's alpha in it.
Just there saying. You go. Well, maybe we'll start giving away like a cat pleaser Genesis card to every random newsletter subscriber. Maybe we'll do that in the next couple weeks. Something, maybe that'll get them going.
So yeah, thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Nick, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us and talk about what's going on. I'm really looking forward to next month and seeing how everything progresses and getting some updates on what we talked about today. So yeah, keep an eye on the socials, join the Discord, look out for announcements, and stay tuned for the next one. Check out all of the shows that they have going throughout the week. I don't, there's too many for me to even know. I just know the ones that I actively host, but I have joined you guys for a few just this week alone. Do you guys have a schedule of that posted somewhere? Like an actual weekly schedule?
We post them just a few days heads up because we're always experimenting with like new content types like this, and things like that. So just staying tuned to the Twitter is usually the best way.
So follow the Twitter, turn on that notification bell, and we will see you guys next time. Have a good
Thanks, everyone.